Any poem, whether it's meant to be read, performed for an audience, or rapped over a beat, begins with a blank piece of paper. How the poem ends up depends on what sort of poetry you choose to write. So let's consider what your options are.
The two types of poetry on the page are formalist poetry and free verse poetry. Formalist poetry is when poets use specific forms and structures, rhyme and meter, in order to build a poem. It's like a container for meaning. The other kind, which we want to talk about here, is called free verse. Free verse poetry is a kind of poetry where the poet chooses the tools that will be used to build the poem, according to what the poem wants. It's a kind of poetry that expresses sound and meaning by the way its lines are arranged on the page.
Here's a free verse poem by William Carlos Williams, in which he shows us how a cat moves by the way he arranges his poem's lines.
As the cat climbed over the top of the jam closet, first the right forefoot, carefully, then the hind stepped down into the pit of the empty flower pot.
The poet Mary Oliver gives us another example of visual art through free verse in her entry called August. Pay attention as the three stanzas unfold on your screen to how Mary Oliver breaks the lines to show the pleasure between finding, picking, and tasting blackberries. When the blackberries hang, swollen in the woods, in the brambles nobody owns, I spend all day among the high branches, reaching my ripped arms thinking of nothing, cramming the black honey of summer into my mouth.
Like Williams and Oliver, you can add layers of meaning to your free verse poem just by the way you organize and break your lines. There's nothing more exciting for the writer of free verse to make a poem look like what it says. Before you start, check out the tips for writing free verse on our website.
It's pretty easy to go from free verse to spoken word, because spoken word is mostly free verse put to performance. The difference is that spoken word is about the creativity of the performer. Spoken word performers utilize inflection, cadence, and the dynamics of loud and soft to underscore the piece's emotional intent.
There's no right way to perform a spoken word poem. The only thing to keep in mind is the feeling you want to communicate to your audience.
Here's the opening of a free verse poem by Gabrielle Calvacaresi called Jubilee. Come down to the water. Bring your snare drum, your hubcaps, the trash can lid. Bring every joyful noise you've held at bay so long.
Here's another way to read the poem Jubilee, more like how a spoken word poet might do it. Come down to the water. Bring your snare drum, your hubcaps, the trash can lid. Bring every joyful noise you've held at bay so long.
When you're performing spoken word poetry, it should almost be like we're seeing the poem happen inside you and you're telling us about it live. Let that feeling be your guide to how you pace the poem and how you vocalize it. Our site links to spoken word performances that show just how diverse and moving spoken word performances can be.
Hip-hop to me is a culture and not just a genre of music. I know there's a common misconception that hip-hop is just a music genre, that is just rap music, but it's actually a culture that consists of several elements, whether that be visual arts, rhythm and poetry, dancing, or music. It's also a lifestyle. It's a way to live. It's a way to be. It's not something you can just take off and leave at home. It's something you take with you every day. It's a mentality. It's a consciousness.
So hip-hop is both a genre and a culture that comes out of Black and Latino experiences in America, especially in response to decades-long and centuries-long oppression. I love hip-hop because I started playing drums as a kid, and I've always been interested in rhythm, and the ability to combine incredibly complex rhythm with stories and with really interesting images just blew me away. And when I really began listening to really thoughtful hip-hop artists in high school, I just never heard anything like it. Rap, which is a part of hip-hop, is basically lines of written poetry, spoken or performed over a beat. To write rap, give every line 4 beats, so that you essentially write a poem in 4/4 time, and use rhyming couplets to add to the poem's music.
You don't have to be all nitpicky about how many words and syllables you use in a line, so long as the last word of your line, the rhyming word, is placed squarely on the 4th beat. In fact, a variation of line length is actually good for the poem's rhythm.
To find out if you have 4/4 time in your lines, even with variation,
say them aloud as you go, and let your ear be the judge.
Here's a passage from Kanye West's All Falls Down, with the rhyming couplets typical of rap. The major that she majored in don't make no money, but she won't drop out, her parents will look at her funny. Now tell me that ain't insecure, the concept of school seems so secure.
Now you try it. Rap along with me, accenting the 4/4 beat as you go. The major that she majored in don't make no money, but she won't drop out, her parents will look at her funny. Now tell me that ain't insecure, the concept of school seems so secure.
Here's one more example of hip-hop, just to make sure you have the feel of it. It's from Kendrick Lamar's rap poem, I've been dealing with depression ever since I adolescence. I can never hear the blessing, I can never see the message, I can never take the lead, I can never bob a weed from a negative is letting them annihilate me. Now let's slow it down. I've been dealing with depression ever since I adolescent, ducking every other blessing. I can never see the message, I can never take the lead, I can never bob and weave from a negative is letting them annihilate me. Notice again the rhyming couplets, and how by slowing down or speeding up, you can make your lines fit together no matter how long the length.
Don't forget to check out the links on this website that will help you fine-tune your poem, whether it's written, spoken, or rapped. And always remember that this belongs to you. You get to decide what to do with it, just so long as you include those 4 basic ingredients that every poem should have: a sharp eye for detail, the element of surprise, the tones and rhythms of a song, and last but not least, creative rewriting to make your poem the very best it can be.